Everybody, it's Christina of CraftyPaws. I'm here to share a welcome new fur baby card with you guys. I'm going to apologize in advance because there's thunder and lightning going on, but this is the only chance I've had to do the voiceover for this. So please bear with me if you hear a lot of thunder. But anyway, my sister-in-law and her family recently got a dog and her name is Luna. So I thought I would do this personalized welcome fur baby card for them. I started with the Altenew to the Moon stamp set, and I'm just stamping out the layered moon stamp or stamps from that set. I start with a light gray, and then I do the next layer with a kind of mid-tone. I end up covering all of this up because I re-stamp all of this on separate cardstock that I cut out to add more dimension and interest to this card. But this doesn't go to waste because what I do is, sorry for that thunder. What I do is I mask this off so that I know exactly where the moon is, so I can do the ink blending to create a moon glow kind of around this moon. So this is how the stamp looks with the 3 layers of the stamps all stamped out together with 3 different colors of gray. If you're interested in the particular colors I used or any of the other materials that I'm using for this card, please check out my blog post, which I will link to below. All of the materials will be linked there. So I'm using some Distress Oxide inks so I can create a kind of glow around this moon. I really wanted this to look magical since the little puppy's name is Luna. And what I'm doing is I'm dabbing off the ink on my scrap paper behind the card front before I blend the ink directly onto my card front. I do that because I don't want it to have a lot of harsh kind of sponging lines, but I end up putting on enough ink so that it really doesn't matter at the end of it all. I'm using Squeeze Lemonade. Then I think the next is Mermaid Lagoon, and then the last is Blueprint Sketch. And I liked that kind of trio of colors where the yellow and the Mermaid Lagoon mixed together. It kind of turns a bit of green. So it's almost, you get like half of the rainbow colors from this ink blending. And I'm just taking my time blending on pretty good saturated layer of color for each of the colors. And then I go back to the next color down so that I can get a softer blend. And I'm going pretty far down. This card front is actually really large. I'm adding this card to a big care package, so the size really didn't matter. I'm just sprinkling on some water. You saw me spray some water onto my hand, and I'm just sprinkling it on. You see a big dollop of water down at the bottom. That splash was a little bigger than I had hoped, but that gets covered up later, so I'm not worried about it. Luckily, it's pretty far down. I'm just dabbing it with a tissue just to make sure it's dry before I go to the next part of the kind of layer building. I'm just squeezing out a bit of acrylic white paint. It's titanium white. This is Winsor & Newton, but it can be really any color, any brand. And I'm using an old toothbrush and just splattering on some of this acrylic white paint so that it really looks like it's a starry night. And I really like that look. I like the mottled look from the water and then the tiny drops from this splattering with a toothbrush. Now, I mentioned to you before that I had stamped out that moon again on some more cardstock, and I thought it would be fun to add a little bit of texture as well. So I'm putting some Versamark ink all over it. I fussy cut it out, and then I'm putting clear embossing powder on that moon. And I really like how that gives a little bit of shine as well as texture and makes it a little bit more, almost not quite like a chipboard piece, but pretty thick and solid. And I'm, as you can see, heating it from the front and the back. It's such a small piece, and I didn't have my tweezer, so I'm just trying to be careful and keep the heat tool moving around. I'm going to back the whole thing with Fun Foam, and as you can see here, I've just traced that moon out, and now I'm fussy cutting it out just a little bit on the inside of that traced line. And I'm just using some Aleene's tacky glue to put that Fun Foam down where my original moon was on the card front, a little bit more original tacky glue, and then the heat embossed moon that I had separately created. Now I'm using the Lawn Fawn still stitched hillside die, and I've cut out some black cardstock for the foreground of this card. And I'm just blending on some more Tim Holtz Distress Oxide and Squeeze Lemonade so that the foreground also looks like it's got a little bit of that moonlit glow to that top edge. And I think adding that little touch of yellow ink really makes that foreground pop as well. I'm just using some wet glue to put that down on the card front. I wanted to move it up a little bit so you see I have some hangover of the card base as well as on that foreground ground. And I'm just cutting off the excess. And I moved it up a little bit just because I realized that the card was a little bit too big, I thought. So this is not quite half of a sheet of cardstock. I've cut it down just a little bit. Now you see me doing some simple Copic coloring, but this is the first for me. I decided that the characters, all these little critters, which are from the Lawn Fawn Upon a Star stamp set, I wanted to give all of these little foxes and rabbits a yellow glow so that it looks like the moon is lighting them up too. And I stamped them out on some scrap cardstock, and I put them in order of how they would be on the card because I wanted the moon glow to come from the correct direction. If the moon is in the center toward above them, then I wanted these critters to be lit correctly. So the center characters have more of the light directly above them. So from the tops, the characters on the left have the glow from the right. The character on the left, the little fox, has the glow from the left. And I'm just using a few colors. I think 3 colors for all of the foxes and 3 colors for the rabbits. And the foxes and the rabbits represent the members of my sister-in-law's family. The rabbits are the girls and the foxes are the boys. I know it really makes no sense because rabbits and foxes really wouldn't live together like this. But I just wanted to use all the cute critters from that Lawn Fawn stamp set. And I'm just going back and blending out. I've used a yellow, a YR, and an E. And they all blend pretty well for these kind of red-brown foxes. And I just wanted to make sure that the transitions from one color to the next was blended out. So I'm going back and forth and then blending out the yellow as well. And I think that that gives these little foxes a really beautiful moonlit glow to them. And I will say that the yellow kind of bleached out the YR. So I'm going back in to make sure that the bleached out kind of look gets blended out. And, you know, just don't lose patience with it. Go back and forth to give the smooth transition. If you get a little bleaching action, go back in with the mid-tone and you can get those bleached out areas to look really well blended. Actually, alcohol markers are really forgiving so long as the paper is resilient enough. And the paper that I use is really inexpensive Georgia Pacific premium cardstock that I get at Walmart. The next little bunnies I'm going to color up as if the rabbits are kind of a dark gray. So I'm starting off with a C2. This is unusual. Usually I start with warm grays for live animals, but I just wanted a kind of a crisper look, so I thought I would go with the cool grays. And I'm just coloring in the rabbits, just the base color, and I'm keeping the bunny tails more white, so I'm leaving some of the white of the cardstock there, but I wanted to give a little bit of dimension with that C2. Now I'm moving on to the C4 to put in where I think the shadows would be. And again, remember the rabbit on the left has the moonlight coming from the right, and the rabbit on the right has the moonlight coming from the left. So that's how I marked out where the lighting would be coming from with that yellow. And the yellow, for whatever reason, works with both cool tones and with warm tones when you're trying to give the sense of a warm glow from some light source, whether it's the moon in this case. I think I've seen it done. Sandy Olnuck did a beautiful scene with street lights, and I know she's done one with a fireplace, and this yellow works beautifully for that. I'm just going back in again and doing the same kind of blending, going back and forth between the darkest to the lightest. These 3 colors Obviously, they're intended to blend well together, so I'm not struggling as much as I did with the foxes, where the colors actually are from different color families. And I wanted to not black out the rabbits, even though I wanted them to be darker. I didn't want, to lose the little eyes at the top and whatnot. So I'm trying to make sure that even though I'm putting in the shadows, I'm also leaving in highlight areas as well. I'm going back in just to reemphasize the darkest shadows one more time because they do get bleached out when you add the lighter tones. So that's it for the coloring. It's relatively simple. If you are interested in more kind of highlighting or lighting Copic coloring, leave me a comment below and I will try and focus on that in the next few days. Again, I'm just going back in at the end with the yellow and making sure that I get that YO2 blended nicely with the lightest gray. I realized at the end that I had forgotten to color the white part, the little tips of the foxes, so I'm going back in with some warm grays for that and adding the little yellow highlight as well. I wanted to keep those lighter than the rabbit, so that looks white. I'm showing you the sentiments that I'm going to be heat embossing on the base of that foreground piece. I'm using my EK powder tool to prep the surface and make sure I get all the static off of it. And I'm using Versamark ink again, putting that a good healthy amount of that onto that sentiment that says, love you to the moon and back. In fact, it says, I love you, and I forgot to mask that I out. So you're gonna see me go back in with my powder tool and cover up the eye so that that doesn't get any of the embossing powder on. I'm using Ranger Superfine white embossing powder. I find that especially for sentiments that are really small, like some of this text is, using the superfine embossing powder really helps. Now I'm just going out back and cleaning up the stray flecks. Even with a powder tool, I find that I do get some stray flecks of that embossing powder. So I take a dry paintbrush, a small one, and I just make sure I get all of that stray powder off before I start heat embossing. And I'm just heating up the front as well as the back, and it gives a really nice crisp sentiment. Now, behind all of these little critters, I have put some foam dots. I've made sure that they're all really well covered, and I'm gonna place the two outside foxes first so I know I get them all centered. I wanted the family not to look like they're in a complete, like regimented line. So I want some of the critters to be up a little higher on the hill, some a little lower on the hill. The sizes of the critters are actually pretty close to the sizes of the people in my sister-in-law's family, so hopefully they'll get the idea that these little animals represent them. Now for the back side of the card. I'm going to make this something that they can frame and put into a shadow box that I'm including in their gift package. So I didn't want to do a traditional card. I thought this would make it flatter and easier to put into a frame. I'm using the adorable little dog and the sentiment from the My Favorite Things new best friend stamp set, and I'm just heat embossing that on the back. I thought that that would be really cute for the sentiment. It says, congratulations on your new fur ball. And I'm just gonna do the same thing. I'm taking off the stray. Sorry, it's a lot of thundering here. I'm heating it now with my heat tool on the front and the back. And off camera, I'm also going to be doodling some dots and dashes all around the back just to frame it out a little bit before I write the message with a white gel pen. And that's my completed card. I hope you've enjoyed this process video. Again, I apologize for the thunder noises. I hope you guys are having a wonderful crafty day. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. Thanks so much for watching.